bad relationship, or if you have disagreements, it's a bad relationship. And I had now take the stance that that actually means you are doing it right in a way. Not to be fighting all the time, but if you are coming up against each other, maybe triggering each other, having some conflict, I view that as, damn, you guys are doing some work and you're growing here. So at least there's the opportunity for that. As you know, there's also the opportunity to just fight, and be miserable all the time. So today we're going to teach you how to not do that. I also take the stance that you have the power to change your relationship on your side. So I teach personal responsibility and doing what you can on your side to clean up your side of the street, so to speak. I'm a relationship coach, so when I see one person, we don't even talk about their partner. It's all about what you can do to affect your relationship. So if you're here to like blame your partner and talk about how terrible they are, probably not going to get much out of this class, just so you know. And the final thing I'll say as sort of the prereq is that I believe love is about what you can give and not what you can get. So that underlines everything I teach. Yeah, so I don't think that needs much explaining, but all about what you can give, in my view. So I'm gonna kind of dive in here. I have a bunch to talk about. If you have questions, we'll try and save them, and we'll do a Q&A at the end. So if you can do that, if it's like a dying, urgent, pressing question that needs clarification in the moment, just raise your hand or shout Nikki, whatever you need to do. So how relationships work. As I briefly mentioned, I believe that we attract someone who will help bring out the unhealed part of ourselves. Sort of like the wounded child within. We all have wounds. Most of us, I'll speak for most of us, have wounds from our past, from our childhood, from the way we were raised. Oftentimes these wounds can come even from before you remember, when you were a baby. So our partners often will have a certain behavior or personality that happens to bring out these wounds or these triggers within us. Does that make sense when I speak in that language? Yeah, okay, cool. So to make it even easier, I'll give you an example. My partner, Warren, and I have been together about 1.5 years. I call myself Maria because his mom is Maria, and she's this very kind of emotional woman, and it used to sort of confuse Warren when he was younger because he's a young boy and his mom's getting all emotional, and it was kind of a trigger. And so now here I am. There he is. Now here I am, sort of exactly triggering him in those exact ways that his mom used to when I maybe have an emotional upset and get sort of, maybe I'm crying a lot, and to him it's very confusing, and it kind of reminds him of like his mom when he was younger. And so in that way, it's kind of triggering these old wounds. It's kind of like the phrase "we date our parents," if you guys have ever heard that. You attract your parents. So then on the opposite side, my mom, when I was younger, she was hella spontaneous, always surprising me in not really great ways. And so I grew up just like hating surprises and hating spontaneity in a way, because as a child it was never a good experience. And now I'm dating this wonderful man who is just totally spontaneous and loves to do things last minute and spur of the moment all the time. And so in that way, I can get triggered. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
As an example? Okay, work. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Do you guys feel this in your own relationship ever?
Sure.
Yeah? No? Maybe? Sometimes? Okay, cool. So yeah, that's kind of how I see relationships working. And so when you understand this, rather than seeing conflict or kind of like issues that come up as this is a bad relationship, we shouldn't be fighting, you can kind of get curious and think, okay, why am I reacting like this? What is it that you're doing that's making me feel so scared, alone, mad, angry, whatever it is right now? And you can kind of look at it with curiosity versus doing what I did for many years of my life, and the minute conflict showed up, I would dump my boyfriend and move on because I thought that meant it was a bad relationship. So yeah, that understanding is helpful. Another point I want to speak to is learning to love your partner as they are. And so that means the great things and the dark sides. And so it's easy to get in a relationship, and at first the chemicals are there and everything feels so amazing, and oh my god, you can't stop thinking about the person, you see all this good, and then all of a sudden you start to see the shadows. You know what I'm saying? After, 6 months, a year, 2 years maybe, the chemicals kind of wear off. You're not maybe in the honeymoon phase as people talk about it. And so this is where I like to remind people that when you're in partnership, it's about loving your partner as they are versus trying to change them into who you want them to be. And so that also means like their dark sides. And I will say this is different than if maybe you have a partner who has like a drug addiction or something. You know, there's something to be said for calling your partner forward to be the best human they can be. But who they are as a person, it's your job to love that if you're going to be with them, in my opinion. And so taking that stance can really be helpful because you're no longer trying to change. Someone causes a lot of tension. People don't want to be changed. People want to express themselves and be who they are. And so if you've tried to change a partner in the past, you probably experienced the tension it creates in the relationship. So just understanding that this is who they are, it's my job to love them here, can really release a lot of that tension. So does that make sense? Loving your partner as they are? Is everyone on board with that? Cool. Hell yeah. All right, so now I'm going to briefly talk about something. This is a whole class in itself, but I think it's worth mentioning today. So I'm going to talk about male and female energies. Again, this is a whole class in itself, but I want to touch on it because I think it's important here. So male and female energies. This isn't to say necessarily males and females. Sometimes males have female energies and females have male energies, but male energy and female energy, they're hella different, as you know. And so one of my favorite ways to describe it is this. If you think back to times where males were kind of hunters and women were gatherers, male energies had a very goal-orientated mission. It was like, go out, find the meat, find the animal, kill it, bring it home, feed the people. Here's your goal, here's your mission, accomplish that. So now you fast forward to today, male energies often have much more of a goal-orientated, kind of solution-orientated doing mindset, right? Yes, I see you nodding over there. So then we've got women. Women were gatherers. So women went out, and their job was to kind of, scurry or walk around and find these little patches of berries and vegetables and whatnot. And when they found that patch, what they had to do was they had to record all the details because they had to remember how to get back to that patch the next day because the health of their tribe depended on it. So you think about this, guys go out, they have their mission, they kill the animal, they accomplish the goal, and now they bring it home and they feed everyone, and the solution has been obtained. Women, on the other hand, come back to the tribe, and they literally would actually tell other women in great detail about where they found their berry patch or their vegetable patch, so that more women in the tribe knew, because if you died and you were the only one who knew where the berry patch was, now the whole tribe's out of berries. Does that make sense? So, fast forward to today, who's ever had an experience like this? If you're a woman, maybe you go to your guy, and you just want to talk about your problems, You just want to share what's going on with you. You had a rough day, and you just want to talk and just share. And maybe your man, after a few minutes, tries to offer you a solution. And that is not what you want to hear. Has anyone had this experience? Anyone? Yeah, okay, cool. So, guys, they don't talk about their problems. Male energies, they don't talk about their problems just to talk. They talk about a problem if they're trying to conform a solution. Whereas women, we actually get relief from just talking about it and being heard and feeling like someone understands what we're going through. And so this can cause a lot of tensions in relationships if you don't understand this, because I've experienced this in my own relationship where I'm like, here's my day, this is what happened, blah, 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 and I'm going in details, and my partner, in the most loving and kind, intending way, will say, well, what if you do this? And I'm like, you're not understanding. So understanding this and just putting it in your brain and saying, okay, I get that we are different. This goes way back before our time. It's embedded in our being. Can sort of just help you have compassion for your partner. And so, as a male, you can understand, okay, my woman doesn't want a solution right now. She just wants to be heard. And as a man, or as a woman, you can understand that if your guy comes home and you're like, how's your day? He's probably just going to tell you it's good. He's probably not going to give you a whole list of details and events and ins and outs. That's just not how male energies operate. So again, this is a whole class, and I could talk about this forever, but I wanted to mention it because I think it's important to understand, and just in having compassion for your partner and knowing, okay, we're different, this is how it is, and then you don't have to get in fights over the fact that he's offering solutions, and he's not telling you all about your day, and vice versa. You can kind of just have that understanding and have compassion for each other there. So, okay, cool. So, hi y'all. Sweet. I'm gonna get into some kind of like tools, which is this kind of the stuff I've learned from the school I'm in right now. So it's gonna be some more like practical tools and stuff like that for you guys. So I want to talk about listening to listen versus listening to understand. This has been absolutely huge in transforming every single relationship in my entire life. As you guys know, we live in kind of a fast-paced society, and it's like we're all doing so much, and someone's talking to you, and you're kind of listening, and you're kind of on your phone, and no one's ever really present kind of society. It's really cool to come somewhere like this and be disconnected and really engage with people. But listening to listen. That's sort of when you're listening so that the other person feels like they were listened to, and then you can go away and do your thing. And have you ever been on the other side of that, when you can tell someone's listening to you, but they're not really listening? They're not really getting your world. They're like, and you're like, I really feel like you're getting me. So that's listening to listen. It's kind of the more surface, you're not really present, you're not really engaged, kind of listening. Listening to understand is a whole new thing. It's listening to understand is, I'm gonna listen to you until you feel understood by me. And so it's not about agreeing with them. It's not about they're right, you're wrong, or vice versa. It's simply, I want to understand your world right now. So an example might be, if let's say your partner comes home like 2 hours late and you're upset, okay? So you're late, listening to understand might look like this. It's like, I was so worried, I didn't know where you were, you didn't call, and you were late, and your partner might get defensive and say, well, I didn't mean to do that, and well, my phone was off, and give excuses and defend themselves, and then you trying to share your experience might not feel very understood because they are defending their position rather than just understanding how you feel. So listening to understand would look more like, hey, you were late and I was so worried. Oh wow, I'm so sorry to hear that. Like, what was that like for you? You get curious. Okay, so let me clarify. It was because I didn't call, and that's why you were concerned, versus I was late. Is that it? And you ask questions, and you clarify, and you just really get their world. And it's not about defending yourself, and it's not about saying they're right. It's just really understanding. So at the end of it, you can say, okay, I understand. Because I didn't call and I was 2 hours late, you felt nervous and scared and that makes so much sense to me because when you were a child, your mom used to, never come home or not come home multiple nights a week, and you'd always be scared. I get it. I totally get your world. And so it's really coming at it with curiosity and really trying to understand where they're coming from, and then just understanding them. And that alone, when you truly understand someone, when you really get present and work to understand them and see them where they are, that is a huge nervous system release. When we don't feel understood, we feel threatened on a brain neurotransmitter brain level. It's kind of engraved. Unsureness is kind of ingrained in our brains as a threat because back when we were hunters and gatherers, if you saw some big animal, you didn't really know what it was, that was a threat. Or if you saw a tribe and you didn't recognize them, that's a threat to your life. And so now, our nervous system kind of has issues distinguishing, okay, this isn't a life-threatening threat, but if it's a threat, you can still become very activated. Does that make sense? Do you guys know when you're activated in your nervous system and you're kind of your eyes are wide and you're maybe talking really fast, you're not even really making sense? That's a nervous system reaction engraved in our bodies from millions of years ago. And so being able to understand someone can really instantly calm their nervous system down. And then you're more likely to be able to have a calm, regulated conversation versus maybe an elevated kind of argument or screaming match or something like that. So ways that you can listen to understand versus listening to listen. Just a couple tools for you. You can ask clarifying questions. So, wait, was it this or was it that? Wait, were you scared or were you angry? You know, just get clear on the details, asking clarifying questions. Remaining present, putting away your phone, looking them in the eyes, and really engaging and not going off in your mind and thinking about what you got to do later or other things. Staying truly present, that right there is huge. And it's something a lot of us don't get a lot of access to in today's world. So it's big. Confirming shared reality. So just as they're talking, okay, hold on, is this right? I want to make sure I'm with you. Did you say it was this and this and this? Okay, cool. Just checking. And really, as they're talking, confirming that you're on the same page. Interrupting, asking questions in a kind way. You know, hey, time out. I feel like I'm losing you. You just said a lot. Can we clarify what you just said? You just said a lot of words, and I'm starting to get lost. Those kinds of things. Okay. So that's learning to understand, or listening to understand. Hugely transformational. I recommend you all try it with your partners. And you can kind of do it, you can kind of practice it in like a exercise fashion of like, hey, let me tell you about your day, and let me just try and really understand you. Let's see if we can do this. If it's kind of weird for you, because it's harder to do when you're triggered. So a lot of these tools, if you can practice them when you're not blown out, then you can bring them to the relationship when you're actually blown out and use them, versus trying to do these things you've never done before when you're like totally in your sympathetic nervous system, out of your mind kind of thing. So another tool I really like is called sharing impact. And so this has to do with more of just sharing your experience, but it's really about not blaming the other person while you do it. And so an example of sharing impact would look like this. When you came home late, I felt scared. Versus, you made me feel scared because you came home late. You guys hear the difference? So it's really just owning your experience, and it's just true. You came home late, and then I was scared. That's just what happened. That was just the reality of the experience. Versus putting that because you did this, I feel this way kind of twang on it. When people feel blame, they're going to get defensive. Fact of nature, it's what humans do. And so if you come at your partner with blame, 80% of the time or more, they're going to come back with a defense. Well, I didn't mean to make you feel scared, or I didn't know I was going to be late, or whatever it is. So if you can take that blame off them and just share your experience from an authentic place, there's a better chance that they can come back with more compassion and understanding and curiosity with you. So sharing impact, beautiful tool, super simple, one sentence, really easy way to just share what's happening for you. And you can do that in any moment. You could just say, for some reason you just walked in the room and my shoulders got tense. I wonder what that's about, you know? And then you can just kind of get curious and learn more about yourself and your partner and how you guys interact and affect each other. Does anyone have any questions on sharing impact? So another tool I love, which I'm sure you guys have heard this word, 'cause it's a big buzzword right now, but boundaries. Boundaries are great, and what I like about boundaries, you can have boundaries that are made up in a moment. So that would be an example of, you know, someone comes up and gets in your face and you're like, whoa, this is a boundary for me right here. I don't like someone 3 inches from my face. That's a boundary in a moment. But what I really like about boundaries is that you can make boundaries, like pre-agreed boundaries. So for instance, here's a great example. We were talking about, you know, how guys like to are solution orientated and women are more talking, connection, feeling understood orientated. So maybe you're a guy and you get this now and you're like, okay, my woman just wants to be heard. But maybe you have a personal boundary. Like, I can actually only listen to the details of your day and be present with you for 5 minutes. After that, I'm going to check out. I'm not going to be there. So you and your partner can have an agreement. Okay, babe. When you get home at the end of the day and you want to tell me all the details about your day, I have 5 minutes where I can actually remain present with you and listen. And after that, I'm going to check out. So that's my boundary. Can we agree that I give you 5 minutes, and then I can go to my cave and do my thing or whatever? Maybe you have, you know, who knows? Everyone's going to be different. Maybe it's like, okay, then at dinner you can talk another 5 minutes or whatever it is. But putting these boundaries in place is so helpful, because if it's pre-agreed upon, then you're both in agreement, you're both down with it, and it can just, it can prevent a lot of arguments, essentially. So let's say you didn't have that 5-minute boundary, right? But you knew in your head you could only listen to your woman and be present for 5 minutes, but you didn't set a boundary. So then she comes home and she's like, oh my God, let me tell you about my day. she's talking and talking, and 5 minutes goes by, and you're max capacity. You can't listen anymore because you're a guy and you're not built to do that, or you're male energy. And so, if you don't have the boundary, you might just keep listening, but really you're not listening anymore. Kind of like start wandering, you start thinking about other things. Now you pick up a tool and you're working on that. Now she's pissed. She's like, "Hey, dude, I'm trying to tell you about my day. You're not even looking at me." And now this is a source for a potential argument. And so, by setting that boundary, agreeing upon it, you can totally avoid that and just say, "Cool, this is it. You know, I have my 5 minutes, babe. I love you. It's been 5 minutes. I can't focus anymore on these details." And then there's no fight to be had. So a lot of these tools are just helpful. Yeah, what's up?
What's the best way to initiate a conversation about setting boundaries without offending the partner?
Okay, cool. I love that question. Thanks. So the question, I'll just repeat it in the mic. The question was, how do you initiate a conversation like that with your partner without offending them? Which totally makes sense. That's huge. So I think for a lot of this, I'll say this. Once you kind of adapt these tools and you decide, okay, I'm going to love my partner as they are. We understand we are fundamentally different. How can we still make this work? You kind of get to those agreements together, and then it just kind of becomes like, this is how we do things. And so I will say the first conversations like this are really uncomfortable. I had that experience in my own relationship. I kind of started going to school for this stuff and running home to my partner like, let's have conversations about boundaries. It's like, oh God. So it's going to be uncomfortable at first. But my belief is if you and your partner are on the same page and you're like, okay, this is how it is. So, I'll just say what I would say. I'd probably say, hey honey, I want to be able to be extremely present when I'm listening to you. And when you're talking to me, I want to be there and I want to understand you. And I don't want you to just be talking to a wall. Because of this, I'm curious if we could talk about boundaries, because I find myself kind of wandering off when you talk for a long time. And so, would you be open to that? Can we just talk about that? And so I would start with almost like how it's going to benefit them. So like, I know you want me to be present when you're talking to me. I want to be present when you're talking to me. So let's have this conversation about boundaries so I can do that. So kind of start with the benefits. If you're nervous, you could just start by how this is going to benefit them. And then just be really gentle. Would you be open to this conversation? And in my experience, my partner is, so I don't know if I'm lucky, but I would say for me personally in my life, it's kind of it's a necessity that my partner's open to these kinds of conversations. So I guess if I had a partner who was just like, no, I don't want to talk about that shit, you should be listening to me all the time, blah, 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 blah. For me personally, that wouldn't be a very fulfilling relationship if someone was totally not open to these kinds of conversations. And so to each their own, but I would do it gently. I would show them how it's going to benefit them. Don't make it about you. I want to do this. I want them to listen to you blab for 10 minutes. That's going to come off way differently than I want to be present with you when you're talking to me because I care and I love you so much. That's going to, have a very different feel going into the conversation. So, does that help? Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm all about pre-agreed boundaries. Another one of these could be, hey, you have a question, yeah.
Back to the last thing you were talking about, sharing impact. So when you say you're sharing impact and then your partner still gets defensive because they see it differently, what are the tools you have in that moment of defensiveness?
Okay. So the question was, when you're sharing impact, if your partner gets defensive as a response to you sharing impact, what kind of tools do you have to work with that? That's a great question, and that's like beautifully, I'll just slide right into kind of my next thing. So other tools I love are self-regulation and co-regulation. Are you guys familiar with these terms at all? Okay, cool. So self-regulation is essentially, it's when you're really aware of you, your nervous system, your triggers, and then you can help regulate yourself. So for instance, I know that when I'm talking to someone and they're blatantly not looking at me, they're like looking down, or just like not looking at me at all, not paying attention, that's a trigger for me. It stems back to my childhood. I know all about it. And so, let's say I'm talking to my partner and he's busy. He's on his computer and he's looking whatever. hey, blah, blah, and he's not hearing me. And now I feel myself get triggered. My heart beats up, I'm sweating, I'm tense, like I know what's going on. Self-regulation in that moment could look like, okay, in my head I'm like, okay, I'm triggered. I'm gonna slow down, take some breaths. Like I know what's going on, so because I'm aware, instead of like acting on this trigger, I'm just gonna stop. I'm not gonna say anything. I'm gonna take some deep breaths. Okay, maybe I need to go take a walk, that kind of thing. So that's kind of what self-regulation would look like. It's not always so easy to do that because sometimes when you're really fucking triggered, you can't even think that clearly. And so I also have things like that where I'm like, when I'm this triggered, I can't even think enough to regulate myself. So in those cases, I will reach out to my partner. And so what co-regulation is like, okay, here's this trigger I have. I get triggered when you do this. This is how I'm going to react. Can you say these things to me? Can you put your hand on my leg? Can you give me a hug? Whatever it is that's going to calm you down in that moment, you can have your partner do. So this is another kind of, I'm going to get back to your question. I'm kind of jumping around, but I will be sure to answer it. This is kind of going back to pre-agreed upon. It's not a boundary, but it's a co-regulation, but it's like pre-agreed upon. So I'll actually just share an example. I have a really weird trigger around like my sexuality, and it goes back to some abuse I had when I was younger, and in a certain energy, me and my partner are getting intimate, and there's a particular energy, and if he says a particular question and I'm in just the right particular mindset, I can get triggered, and it's not a good trigger, you know. So I'll get really weird, I might look at him weird, my heart's racing, I like don't really know what's happening, I'm no longer trying to be intimate, I'm triggered. And so we've talked about this, and he knows exactly what that looks like on me. And so there's actually certain sentences, just little things he can say to me in those moments. Like, it's okay, you're in control. You know, little things that I know will calm me down. And so we've talked about that ahead of time. And so now if that happens, he can actually step in if he sees me and I'm not able to regulate myself and I'm still in that kind of confusing, triggered state. He will step in and say these things, and he will come up to me gently and say these things, and instantly when he says them, I will start relaxing. And so that's an example of co-regulation. As you get more aware of what triggers you and what sets you off, you can talk with your partner, and you guys can like help each other out, you know, because self-regulation is great, but it's not always possible. I'm sure you guys know when you're like in it, you look back and like, what just happened 10 minutes ago? I was freaking out. So yeah, that's where co-regulation is really helpful. I also want to say one more thing on boundaries, and oh yeah, it was just an example, but so let's say maybe when you're in an argument and it gets really heated, you're the type of person that needs to walk away for 10 minutes, right? And typically that person dates the person who needs to be talking to you when you're in an argument, so it's perfect, because one of you like needs to talk and the other one needs to get away. And so this is a great place to put a boundary in place, a pre-agreed upon boundary. So, you know, let's say I'm the one who needs, well, this is true. I am the one who needs to like talk when me and my partner are in conflict, and he's more of the one who needs to like walk away. And so you can make an agreement and say, okay, when we're in a really heated argument, I need space to come back to me. And so let's make an agreement that when we're in an argument, I'm gonna walk away for 10 minutes. I'm gonna go to my office, I'm gonna go take a walk, whatever it is. And I will come back after 10 minutes. That's my agreement. And so you could put that kind of agreement in place, and then when you guys are in that argument, your partner needs to walk away. If you know, okay, we've agreed he's going to leave for 10 minutes and he'll be back, you can feel a lot more calm versus someone just storming out. You don't know if they're coming back. You need to connect, so then you're even more triggered in it. That's a really helpful place for an agreement. I've seen that in my own life and many others. So I wanted to share that example. Okay, I want to come back to your question. So sharing impact. So if I shared impact and then my partner got defensive. So if I said, man, when you came home late, I felt really scared. And then if they said, oh, geez, I didn't mean to, and, you know, my phone was off, and you're being clingy, or whatever, that kind of thing. Is that what you mean? Okay. I guess for me, so if they came back defensive, well, geez, I didn't mean to. What's the problem, you know? I might say, well, I'm just trying to share my experience. Like, I'm not saying it's your fault, but you were late, and then I felt really scared. Can we explore this a little bit? You know, I might kind of approach it that way. If they So like that gentle sort of just curiosity, like, can we just talk about this for a little bit? Like, I'm just curious why that happened and I want to kind of figure this out. Now let's say they were not having it, they're like, this is stupid, like, what are you, my whip and chain? Like, I can do what I want, whatever that is. Then I would maybe, I guess for me in that moment, because if they're going to be triggered, I'm going to give them whatever space they need. But this is a tool also, I'm actually glad you asked this. This is a tool, like sharing impact. I would get your partners, like, I would tell your partner about this tool before you just whip it out on them. It can definitely make people defensive. If you're just sort of like, hey, sometimes people get defensive from gentleness, because they almost expect more. So with sharing impact, I would take this tool to your partner and be like, hey, can we try this out? And like show it to them and see if they're down. If they agree to be down, they might get a little defensive, but then if you say, hey, I'm just sharing the impact over here, like this is just my experience, then if they already agreed to use the tool, they're probably gonna be like, okay, word, I get it. But if they're just like hella not having it, I mean, yeah, that's definitely gonna happen. And so I guess if they're just like, this is stupid and I don't want you to share impact like that, I mean, for me, if that was my partner, I guess I'd be like, well, damn, okay. These are tools I want to use to better our relationship, so can you get down on them? And again, like talking about that while someone's triggered isn't the best. So this is a conversation I would have before. But if they were to be defensive and they already agreed to the tools and they were cool with that, I would just keep being gentle. Like for me, when my partner gets defensive, I just try and remain gentle, like as much as I can until I'm triggered, and then it's a whole other thing. But okay, so let's say he gets defensive. Okay, I hear that you didn't like mean to make me upset, and that's fine. You didn't make me upset. You were just late, and now I'm upset. Like, I'm not trying to blame you. Like, I would make that really clear. So that's the whole point of sharing impact. It's like, it's not your fault. This is just my experience. So yeah, I would just kind of remain gentle, make it clear, like I'm not trying to blame you. I'm just curious. Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so does anyone have any questions on co-regulation or self-regulation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, is it ever appropriate to let your partner know that you think that they've been triggered, like they're in a triggered state?
Okay, cool. So the question was, is it okay to let your partner know that you think they've been triggered? This is tricky because when someone's triggered, the last thing they want is someone else to tell them that they're triggered. That is like a trigger in itself. It's like, I'm triggered, you're fucking triggered. So I'd be careful with that language. How I would approach it rather is, for me, it's like, okay, I want to get clear on all my partner's triggers. That's like, I'm constantly curious about that. I'm like, wait, is that a trigger? Is that a trigger? But I'm talking about it when he's not triggered. Like, I'm just always observing him, his life, how he goes through the world, and getting curious. And so once you get to know those triggers, and then you and your partner, through communication, through talking about this stuff, learn, okay, what calms you down in a trigger. For me, personally, I don't think I would look at my partner and say, damn, you're triggered. I would notice, okay, he's triggered. Okay, what did he say helps him? Oh, yeah, it really helps him to, like, if I rub his arm. Okay, he said it really helps him if I give him space. Whatever it is, it really helps him if I say these words. And so for me, I'm going to notice a trigger. I might say in my head, like, shit, he's triggered. And the minute I notice he's triggered, my job, for me personally, becomes, if I'm resourced enough and I'm not triggered, is to help him calm back down. So I personally wouldn't recommend using those words with your woman while she's triggered. But you could say that in your head and become aware and then think, okay, what do I got to do right now to help her come back down? And then later you could talk about it and be like, whoa, when you're not activated, then later you can kind of go back and be like, that was crazy. Like, remember when I said that and then you got really reactive? Oh, yeah, I was, and then you have more of a conversation. But you got to remember, when people are triggered, they're in their animal brain. They are not in their, like, clear thinking, human, adult brain. It's like your scared child brain or your animal brain. You're not thinking clearly. You're acting out of necessity, out of survival. And so remembering that about people is hella helpful because you don't want to say things like, you look triggered to someone who's triggered. I'll just leave it at that. Don't say that. Yeah.
So follow-up question is,
Okay.
How do you figure out with your partner which phrases to say to help calm them down?
Okay, cool. cool. So the question is, how do we figure out what are those phrases that are going to calm us down? This is a great question. So for me personally, to figure that out, it's hard to like figure out when you're triggered again. So what I do personally and what I have done with my partner, once we identify, okay, this is a problem, this is a trigger, I keep getting triggered, how can we regulate from this? I will literally take myself back there. So it's kind of like, it's not meditation necessarily, but it's like sit down, okay, close your eyes, take yourself back to that trigger. Like think about those things that trigger you there. Get yourself to the point where you're tense and your heart's racing and you really feel triggered. And then it's kind of like self-exploration, kind of like figuring out, okay, and like what I've done for me is like I kind of think about what I would have wanted to hear as a child, because a lot of my triggers are connected to childhood wounds. So I think about like, okay, what did 12-year-old Nikki want to hear at that point? Like when mom was, spontaneously running out the house and gone for 3 months, what did I want to hear? I wanted to hear, I'll be back. Like that's all I wanted to hear. I'll be back, because I didn't know as a kid if she was going to be back. And so you can kind of explore that stuff by going back to your childhood and thinking, what did I want to hear when I was that little boy or girl and that trigger was happening? If you haven't connected it to the childhood wound, you can kind of do what I was talking about and sort of sit down, take yourself back there, and see if you can find out